Hi guys, and welcome to Highgarde, the capital of Vestia and one of the largest ports in Yarowyn. This is the first city I plan to build on the map, and my god, is it going to be a big one. Today we're going to be building the walls and gatehouses of the lower city, which will give us a great framework to build in for the docks and slums in the area below. Now this area is quite big, so it might well be a town in its own right, and if you guys have any names for it, please do comment them. I expect as the lower city expands, we'll see shops, marketplaces, warehouses and pubs pop up all over this area. I want to make it feel like it's bustling with trade from all over the known world, but also make it feel like the area around the port is poorer and the true wealth of the city lies high above on the cliffs. One of the things I wanted to start with was just laying out the foundations of the towers and setting out the angles of the walls to make sure they all connect up and they look like they're roughly in the right place, using the hills as a reference. I ended up moving a lot of these, but this gave me a good visual of the area I was planning on building on. So I was trying to use the actual hills themselves as a base, and then actually move across on there. I didn't go all the way out because I didn't want to do an absolutely massive area where we couldn't build. There was a bit of a small forest to remove, but a good airbrush just knocked that right out and wasn't too bad at all. Now, using this type of planning is really useful because you don't actually end up placing a load of blocks. It's pretty quick to do, and it also allows you to know where the natural points for example, gatehouses are, and allows you just to put down a couple blocks just for those. As mentioned in the planning video, quite a few of you submitted ideas of a sea fort to guard the main port, which was such an awesome idea. I looked up a lot of sea forts online, and a lot were circular in shape, and I thought that it would really be quite cool to use this quite heavy for the sea fort that I'm planning on doing, and have lots of circles sticking out at the main fort at different levels. Now this really helped it make it look unique, and was really surprisingly easy to do, so if you guys are thinking about something similar, really do go for it. As a general rule of thumb, I had the bigger circles lower and kept the small one higher up, almost as a vantage point, just sticking out there. It also kind of ended up being this kind of natural kind of blockage for the main bit, so almost if you had some cannons on the inner side, they wouldn't be able to be shot at all until those enemy ships get further into the port. Now, there wasn't any base for the fort, so I started building up a rocky outcrop to make it look like the fort had been built on top of it. I used 3 different layers to actually texture the fort, the bottom green being the coastal rock that it's sat on, the light blue being a darker, wetter and more worn looking rock, and above that we had the main stone brick texture that I actually used. Now the actual stone brick texture I used had a lot more of the dark stone to make it look more weathered. One of the comments from Fort Scalar was that the bigger towers would have wooden floors, as the stone would be too heavy, so I ended up putting this onto the fort to have this kind of like dark wood, and I went pretty simple with just using 2 different blocks or textures with this one. And it turned out pretty good actually, I'm pretty happy with it. Now with the Crenellations I wanted a different style than the ones that we used in Fort Scalar. As these walls are newer and are seen as you enter the city either by land or by sea, I wanted them to look much more stylized and impressive. It took a while to get exactly what I wanted, but I'm pretty happy with the results, and it's using heavily on the the arrow slits and using vertical slabs and things like that, but I'm really happy with how it looks. I think it looks quite elegant, but also looks quite defensive as well. So after building the main structure, I realised quite quickly that there wasn't a way to get up into the top of the tower, so it's whether we're going to have like some sort of trebuchet or catapult or just some large ballistas, for example. So I decided to build a tower onto the side of it. Now the back of this wall wasn't that detailed, so actually this really added to it, and it's just like a small vertical tower going up. Now the next bit is to build up all of the walls, so I decided to obviously just build up on those towers. I'd moved a couple of these, but pretty much a lot of them were in the same place. So I built up the towers to about 11 blocks high, I think it was in the end, and then just whatever the walls were, I just ended up extending this, having a total of 5 blocks going across, so I wanted 3 blocks of walking space on it. And that was pretty much it, and just going up at the different angles and making sure I had like a gentle slope going up, but also making sure that it was actually defensible. Now these walls are quite a bit lower than what I'm planning on doing in the main city. The idea being that this kind of area, although it is important to the actual city itself, it's not as well defended as those on the high cliffs that are going to be behind us. Now, building up the gatehouse, one of the comments I actually had was for me to actually do complete gatehouses, which included portcullises. So I decided to extend these towers, so there was plenty of room. So much so that I was able to put in a total of 2 portcullises and also a reinforced gate in the middle. I'm not too sure about the gate in the middle, so if you guys can comment about that, that'd be great. But I think this actually really worked out well, so I'm really glad that I kind of read that comment and decided to go with that, because I think it actually needed it, especially for these main gates, and you know, having portcullises is very, very medieval. Now, one of the things that you can see here is that I actually saw a 3D model online of a gatehouse that had the centre sticking out of it slightly with some arches, and I tried to recreate this on the gatehouse, and actually I'm pretty happy with it. So I copied the Crenellations that we built up before and actually moved them around. Now, one of the things you'll notice about the stone brick that we've got is that it hasn't got that dark stone, or at least not as much. With this lower bit nearer the sea, I have put in some dark stone as a kind of bottom layer, but that, as we're going to go up into the higher hills, that's going to disappear a bit. And I think at some point what we need to do is actually build up some supports onto these walls, because I think it's kind of needed now, especially on all of it. So that's something I'm going to add in, probably off camera and a bit later on. So you can see me just adding in all the arrow slits and trying to make it defensible. Now, of course, now that we've got one of the gatehouses, this is the main land bit, so that any of the other kingdoms bring down trade would probably go through this gate. So I wanted to map out the main road. So it's 7 wide, which it might go wider at parts, or it might go thinner at parts. I think we're going to see how it all fits in. And you can also see me applying a different layer on top of this, so it's a kind of like muddy stone rather than anything else. I want to do a full stone with less mud right on top of the hills, but this one I wanted to do like a mix. So when we go from the muddy kind of like dirt path we've been using for most of the other builds, like in Silver Sage, we can just switch it straight in. So I'm building up a couple more towers again. That's using the same kind of technique that we've been using before, which is placing down a couple towers and then moving them. Now, especially around this area, I ended up moving quite a few of the towers just to make them kind of fit in line. Now, this did push out the boundaries of the city a little bit, so we've actually got even more space than I was actually planning on doing on my plan or any of you guys' plan. But it made more sense to actually build it around here. Now, there's some that still don't really fit on the top of hills, but they're a bit closer. For example, this one here could have been on the hill just behind it. But I'm actually planning on possibly doing a quarry in that area, so it looks actually like a nice natural quarry. So if it is a quarry, then that adds in, especially with it being a big dip, an extra layer of defense in a way. Although it's obviously an unnatural one, it does kind of make sense, so I think we'll do this. Now, this is the most diagonal part of the tower, and it was a real pain to do the crenellations. A lot of the crenellations I ended up doing off camera, just to kind of save time, especially since I've already shown those. So we're building another gatehouse. This is based off the one that we've got down below that we saw earlier. So it's got one big tower, and then it's got one smaller one. And this actually worked really well with the natural area that we've got. Now, another thing about this one that's slightly different than the one we had in the lower area, this is actually a couple blocks higher. Now, that's because of the different hills that we've got on this side. And because of that, I ended up building the sticky outy bit that I kind of like mentioned earlier slightly off, so you'll see me move it in a second. There we go, I've moved it up now. But it's pretty much going on the same style. I also decided to do complete pink with this one, just so you can see the actual bits of detail that I've put in just as a base, and then when I colour it in. So, moving down another path, this one actually weaves down. Now, because of that, it's going to be, almost like a less travelled one. This would be going from the Iron Road from, say, Wagrendale, going down that side. This would be one of the entrances that you can actually get into the city. Now, there is actually going to be another one as well, higher up on the hills. And then just extending this into the main area. Now, this is a really messy area, so I ended up doing quite a lot of manual block placement with the actual wall to get the path to look smooth. It was a bit of a pain, but it's always worth it when you're doing these kind of things. But that will go up into the main, let's call it the Cliff City for the time being. And I also added in an extra path going all the way down here. Now, this one was going to extend and go onto the dock kind of path that we had built earlier. So this is going to be the main one. So whenever you unload from your docks, you'll go up this path. Now I think it probably needs to be widened, but I don't want to do that yet until we've got everything finished. So here is the finished build, guys. It's taken absolutely ages. It's taken days and days and days to actually build it, but you can see all the extra crenellations that I've added onto it, and I think it looks pretty cool. I think what we need to do though is add in extra details onto the walls. Of course, we haven't done any bits that are kind of like collapsing or breaking down. I think that would really add some detail into it, but also it needs a lot of supports, because a wall this size especially would have quite a few supports. A couple of the towers also need to have a few different arrow slits, but I'm pretty happy with the design. I really like the crenellation design that it got in this one. It looks quite fancy and quite nice. Now when we get into the higher city towers, I think what we're going to do is actually have them with roofs on them. So it's just this lower part that we're going to have these, you know, flat open ones, except probably on the high cliffs where we do have a couple areas where we'll have things like trebuchets. Now, talking about trebuchets, what I'm thinking to do on this gatehouse especially is possibly put on trebuchets or ballistas or anything, or kind of like siege equipment on the top. I don't know what you guys think. It's whether we have a couple different trebuchets on there or not. I think it'd be quite interesting, but I'm really happy with how this turned out, especially the middle bit. I think it looks really quite cool. Now we also need to extend that path out and bring it around to Silver Sage. It'd be nice to link those two up. I think it'd be really good, and it'll give us an idea of what we can actually do. But by far, my favourite bit of this build so far is the sea fort. So if you guys have got any names for the sea fort, that'd be really good. So it should load in a little bit. It just looks really cool. So I've added in a couple extra details on this off camera. Stuff like putting in a couple stairs to cut a groove into it. And also putting in a couple of these almost like shelves onto it. So this is where if you're firing arrows up, it would actually block them, but it doesn't actually stop you from firing down that much. So if they're a little bit further away, it's fine. And then if you've got the lower level, which can actually shoot them, so it almost allows a little bit extra protection. Now I think on these actual sticky outy tower bits, which I'm going to call them, I think we're going to probably end up putting in some cannons. But guys, that is it for the first episode of Highgarde. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Now, next episode, it's kind of up to you guys what we do. We can either start on the port, or we can start on the slums area. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.